Welcome to Spinning Wheels, episode 26, which means if this is your first time tuning in, you've got one heck of an adventure to catch up on. Guy Smith is the other half of this double act. And Guy, talking of double acts, if there was one person that we really should have followed Steve Soper with, I think we found him. But firstly, you and I often come off one of these shows and say, wow, that was really good. And we both text last week to say, that was really cool. One eye-opening look behind the scenes at an incredible career, but also an honest look at Steve Soper's life and his psychology and his mindset.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I mean, to hear somebody of Steve Soper being so kind of honest. I mean, you kind of think him as this kind of macho racing driver, kind of, you see how he raced in touring cars, but actually he came across and he was very open and honest about the struggles behind the scenes and the challenges of being a professional racing driver, which was really sort of quite refreshing to hear, really. But yeah, we've had such a great response with Steve. I mean, obviously, I think the touring car fans have been, have come out in force, and they really enjoyed listening to him. And of course, the fantastic stories that that Steve was telling us leads on to our kind of next guest. It was an obvious one. It's such a great rivalry that's been talked about. So looking forward to this one, Paul.
Yeah, well, today's guest has broken all sorts of records, but most importantly, he's broken a record for the number of questions that we've received from race fans, which probably says all I need to, but I've never been very good at learning when to shut up, so I'll continue. If you ask any British touring car fan who watched the series in the 90s, who their favorite driver of all time is, chances are he's sitting with us tonight in our virtual studio. A two-time BTCC champion who pulled off both those championships pretty much exclusively on two wheels. The man who put the cool in Vauxhall Cavalier and who helped to turn British motor racing into a real show. You'll be pleased to know he's as outspoken now as he was when he was ruling the roost in the BTCC. He is John Cleland, and if we had a drum roll, we'd play it. John, thank you so much for joining us. Why on earth were you so keen to tell your story after last week, I wonder?
I did. Anyway, firstly, it's really great to be here, guys, and I'm pleased to hear that there are still so many people out there with really good memories. They must be really old if they can remember when I was racing. But to follow on with Steve, it was about Steve and I in touring cars. It was about Vauxhall and BMW, and it seemed to be that when I started in 1989 in the Touring Car Championship in the Little Ascot, I was still up against the BMW to win the championship. And it seemed to carry on like that through the next 5, 6, 7 years. So I was never really very far away from Steve Soper or a BMW for that matter. So it was great fun.
But it started, actually, I've got a model here, which is quite appropriate, as well as the one behind me there. It started in rallying for you, didn't it? Well,
no, it actually started way before that. I got my first competition license, believe it or not, in 1971. And I started in hill climbs, sprints, nighttime rallies, autocross, rallycross. And the deal was, my old man was a scrutineer. And as a kid, I would get bundled into the car on a Sunday and we'd head off to Rest Be Thankful or Doon or Ingliston or somewhere for him to scrutineer and me to just walk around the paddock and watch as a, 13, 14-year-old kid. And he would never buy me a go-kart, never buy me a kart. That was it. And he actually took one back as a part exchange. I remember it was a rotten old thing with I think it had a Bultaco engine, it had a gear lever, and not what you give a sort of 12-year-old kid, really. And we could never get it to go. We towed it up and down the main road behind our house with a Lotus Cortina, of all things, to try to get this thing to go. Never went. So I never, ever did karting. I had to be 17, really, before I got a license and I could drive to and from. And the deal was, my father would buy the car, and I had to find the money to run it. And at the end of the year, I had to return him his money, or a profit, or preferably both. And I thought at the time, what a hard old beggar. But it turned out it was a really good introduction to motorsport. It meant that I wasn't given it on a plate. I had to work for it. And I remember I did the first sort of real championship was the Scottish Hill Climb Championship in a Mini. And we towed it behind a van and we slept in the van. And we were up at a place called Rumster, which is about 10 minutes from John O'Groats, right at the top end of Scotland. And it was in the days where you could have a real hoot and a carry on, and it was a party on the Sunday night and leave to come back down on the Monday. And it was the days of the Forth Road Bridge. I lived south of the road bridge. We were north of the bridge. And you had to pay a fee to come across it. Now, the fee, I think, was 50 pence. And we had spent all our money. We did not have 50 pence between us to come back over the bridge. So we had to make a detour runabout to get back home again. And that was kind of how the early part of my motor racing career was. It was about, we would race the Mini one weekend, we'd take it home, we'd jack it up, put a sunk guard on it, autocross it the following weekend, then maybe rally cross it, then drop it back down, do a sprint. So the poor wee thing by the end of the season was worn out. So really, I've been racing cars off and on. Well, last year was the first year ever since 1971 that I have not sat in a racing car.
Wow.
And done something competitive. So thanks, COVID. You buggered my record.
You can be forgiven for last year, I think, can't you? We can forgive you that one.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to forget completely about last year. I've actually got the Vectra. I'll come to that in a wee while, but my Vectra is down in the garage down here at home. So because I wasn't looking like doing any races, I would go down at night and sit in the car and just make noises and feel like I was actually doing something.
You know,
the internet would have gone mad for those videos.
Yeah, that's right, exactly.
Johnny, are you from now? My brother-in-law they have a caravan dealership in Vauxhall. So he asked me, did you used to have a garage, or your father a garage in Bogside? Is it
correct?
Yeah, is that correct? So
that's right.
Yeah, so my brother-in-law has Duncan's Caravans in Wishart. So
is that Danny Duncan?
Danny Duncan, yeah, that's my sister married Alistair, Danny's son. Yeah.
Right. No, I knew Danny. I knew Danny for years. We were about 3 miles from Danny Duncan's Caravans. My father was a Triumph, Jaguar, Rover, Land Rover dealer, and I went off to Triumph in Coventry to do my apprenticeship. And that was 1971. And that was actually my very, very first competition event. It was a Triumph auto test in the grounds of the factory in Coventry, round the bollards, in and out, the usual stuff. And I did that with a 1200 Triumph Herald or something like that. So that was my first competition foray back then. I've still got the trophy. I won something.
Brilliant.
Was there any thought at that point, John, that this might go on to something, or were you just having fun and just expected to be working in the dealership, because I know you did work in the dealership, and that was it?
Yeah, I mean, I had absolutely no thoughts to becoming a professional driver, or far less doing it on a bigger scale. And I proved to my father that he was my biggest fan and continued to be all the way through my touring car career. And he was a great help in many, many respects. But he would buy the car and I would run it and find the money to run it. And then, as I say, return him the money. And the car we bought after the Mini was a B8 Chevron. And I hill climbed that. He would never let me race, because he was back in the era of Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart, and he knew Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart really well. And of course, back then, guys in circuit racing were being killed frequently. So I have a funny feeling that was, and being a scrutineer as well, he kind of had it both sides. So I was only ever allowed to do one race. And my first circuit race was in the Mini, and it was at Ingliston, and I came fourth out of, I don't know, there was 24 in the race that day, so I came fourth. The next year we had the Chevron B8. Now he gave £1,400, which included a spare set of wheels and a trailer. And it was a proper little thing with a BMW 2-litre engine. I went up and down the country, did all the hill climbs from Wiscombe Park to Doon in Scotland. And at the end of the year, I sold it for £2,000. And I thought I'd done really well. I'd got a profit and I've got rid of it because we can now afford to buy the next car. Anyway, a number of years later, I phoned up, Gregor Fiskin was advertising one. And I phoned him and I said, Gregor, the chassis number on that, can I just check it? Yep. I said, that was my car. He said, well, you're not in the history anywhere. And I told him who owned it. I sold it to a guy called Simon Phillips, who then sold it to Stirling Moss. And it then went to Sweden, Japan, and back to the UK. And Gregor was asking £285,000 for it.
Wow.
And I got $2,000 for it. So I'm actually not much of a car dealer, really. And I think the really clever people, I think, in motorsport are the guys that can afford to hang on to the race cars and leave them in the corner, because there is no argument they go up in price.
Yep.
Guy, I'm sure there's you'd love one of those Bentleys in the corner of the garage, because
I would.
The price would have gone rocket.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely agree. Completely agree.
Although I have actually found Guy's very first kart, and I'm going to reunite him with him, and the price hasn't gone up much on that one. It sounds worse than yours.
Paul, I don't think that's gone up in value, to be honest, but
that hasn't. But it's still a big part of history.
So I read, John, that that your dad bought a Holden Commodore 1984 Bathurst, winning Holden Commodore. Is that right? Is that how you're going to?
Yeah, he was actually one of the representatives on the Vauxhall Dealer Sport, as it turned out. It was the Opel Dealer Sport originally, because we were Opel dealers. And he went on holiday. My younger brother lives in Australia, and he went on holiday to Australia and met up with Peter Brock and bought, it was the John Harvey car, which was the sister car to Brock's, that came, I think they came first and second at Bathurst on the 1000. And my old man did a deal to bring it back to the UK to run as a Vauxhall, Vauxhall Senator in the Thunder Saloon series. And Vince Woodman and I drove the car to win the championship. And when it arrived across here, it was still very much as it had raced in Australia. It still had the door cards on it, wind-up windows, and it still had some mechanics had been having a fag while they were working on it. And there was still ash in the ashtrays and things like that. It was just proper race car, but a great thing to drive. And it sort of started a bit of a relationship that I had with Australia and then with Brocky, which I'm sure we will cover at some point. But yeah, he bought it on behalf of Vauxhall Sport, and we ran it in the UK and won lots of Thunder Saloon races with it.
So where did the Vauxhall Sport thing come from? Because there's one thing buying a race car, and there's another thing buying it on behalf of the works team, effectively.
Well, the way Vauxhall Sport worked in those days, each Vauxhall dealer would put, I think it was £5 for every car they sold, went in a fund, and that helped to support their motorsport activities, whether it be Thunder Saloon in those days, rallying with Louise Aiken Walker in the World Rally Championship, in the UK with Dave Metcalf and Novas. And then they were pretty good at handing out a bit of help to lots of people up and down the country that wanted to do a wee rally or a bit of racing or whatever. And it was a great, at the time, Vauxhall had no motorsport really. And then this whole Vauxhall Sport thing created a whole generation of people that started racing with a Vauxhall engine, Formula Junior, Formula Vauxhall Lotus.
Yeah.
And it really just came from somebody at Vauxhall thinking, this is a good idea. And there was a team of really good people there. And it grew from there.
Yeah. We actually had Mike Nicholson on at some point last year, wasn't it, Paul? And obviously, he was pretty much a Vauxhall man through and through as well. So he kind of talked about a lot of that.
Yeah, and also Mike Broad as well, didn't we? Mike Broad as well, another Vauxhall rally man.
Yeah, I did listen to that one with Mike Nicholson, and I'm sure he said that they had to get a lawyer in place when I was driving for them. I'm sure that's what he said. It was a bit cheeky.
In respect to Bathurst, John, I mean, we're going to come up to it in a minute, but one of the things noticed with Bathurst is how well you took to driving those cars. A lot of foreign drivers that have gone and raced over it, done the Bathurst 1000, have jumped in the V8 and really struggled and found it difficult. But you seem to have kind of took to it, taken to it like a duck to water. Do you think that maybe having that Holden Commodore, early in your career gave you you kind of got used to driving those kind of big powerful cars? Do you think it was a benefit for you?
Well, I'd come through, other than the Mini, and when I stepped out of the Mini, I went into a Chevron B8. Then we moved up the next year to a Chevron B23 that had been competing in the European, been at Le Mans and places like that with Red Rose Racing. Yeah. I then moved into production saloons, so Opel Commodores rear-wheel drive, then the Thunder Saloon rear-wheel drive, 550 horsepower, then the Carlton, which had, I think it had 7-litre, 650 horsepower engine. So I hated, with a passion, front-wheel drive. I completely hate understeer. It's the worst thing on the planet. So for me, having a rear-wheel drive car that you can steer with your right foot was really what I was all about. And you're right. The first time I went to Australia, I went out to compete in '93 as teammate with Peter Brock. And this came about because Alan Gow, who runs the British Touring Car Championship, I got on brilliantly with Gow because there are few people brave enough to tell him he's a prick. But he and I have a really good relationship. And he lined me up with his drive and came with me to Australia. And he said, now, whatever you do, don't adjust anything. Just Brock's not that way. Let him do it all, and you just get in and drive it. And he won't let you fiddle with anything. So I left Oulton Park, a race meeting at Oulton Park we were doing, flew to Australia for the Easter weekend or the Monday or the Tuesday, whatever it was, to do a press day at Bathurst. So the first time I'd seen it, and Brock took me around the track beforehand, and he said, this is what you do here, and this is what you do there. And I mean, it is, you've been there, guys, so you know what it's like. It's the race that every race driver I know wants to go there if they've never been there. It's a fabulous place. So I go there, I do that, and Brock, partway through the day, said, right, it's your turn. And we were taking press, journalists and stuff around in a proper race car. So I'm strapping myself into this thing, and the heavens opened like you have never seen rain. So my first experience of Bathurst was in the wet. So I managed to come out unscathed from that. And they said, right, what we've got another car down at Phillip Island. So we flew from Bathurst Airport with the team, Brock and I, down at Phillip Island. And he then again took me around the morning, and he showed me Phillip Island, how to do this and how to do that. And if anyone that's been there, it is the most picturesque, fast, ballsy circuit on the planet. So Brock goes out, sets a benchmark. He said, listen, he said, anything you want to adjust, just adjust it. I said, well, I've been told you don't want me to do that. He said, who told you that? He said, Alan Gow. He said, I ignore that. He said, whatever you want. He said, let me know and we'll do it. Because I got on really famously with him, and he was just such a lovely, lovely guy. He would have time to talk to the real mountain animals from Bathurst that would come down, and the real wild guys, or he would likewise stand and talk to the bank manager in a suit with just the same way. He was just a superstar. So at Phillip Island, he goes out, sets a time, came back in and said, right, I'm going to see how you get on. And within 5 laps, I've never having seen the place before, I've gone quicker than Brock. So I realized sort of fairly quickly that the V8 was something I could pedal quite well and I could adapt to quite easily. So I got dragged in, and Brock went out again and went quicker. And he said, let me have some new tyres this time. So he went out on brand new tyres and obviously went quicker. So I said, okay, can I have some new tyres, please? And they said, yeah, okay, here. Bolted some on, and I went quicker than him again. So after that, we struck up a really good relationship that we were, this is fine. We know what we're doing. Yeah. We're capable of doing the job. And although we had a really interesting race that year, I've managed to go back there 12 more times. I've done the race 13 times and stood on the podium, having come second one year. And just to stand up there on the podium, looking at all the spectators at this place, driving up on the warm-up lap and seeing the thousands upon thousands of spectators. And there, when I went there, there was no Nissans or anything else involved in it. It was Ford or Holden. You were either a Ford supporter or a Holden supporter.
A bit like,
and if you,
like Vauxhall and BMW in the BTCC.
Absolutely, a bit like Vauxhall, the BMW, and the BTCC. And there was about as much hatred as well. Because if you were a Ford supporter, the Holden guys used to rip you senseless, and the other way. But over the years, I've driven both Holdens and Fords, so I have no problem with either. But you're right, getting into it was easy. I mean, there's lots of guys like Andy Prio, Alan Menu, Jason Plato, Ivan Muller, James Thompson, really good, proper drivers.
Yeah.
The only one that ever dialed into them as well was Andy Prio. Andy could pedal them pretty good. Yeah. I just seemed to get in it, feel comfortable in it, and was capable of pulling a time out of it. So I was quite proud of that fact.
Did you get any profile back at home during all this time, John? Because at that time, you know, the British Touring Car Championship was just starting to gather a bit of momentum fan-wise. But I can imagine, I don't remember, but I can imagine you over there doing this was very high profile, but you must have then come home to just a deathly silence as you walked through the airport and must have thought, this is weird because I'm doing all of this in Australia, but they don't know who I am back home. Was there any element of that?
There obviously was, because I think I remember watching an interview with Andy Rouse recently, and Andy was talking about the way the British Touring Car Championship evolved through 89, the Sierra Cosworth days, and then 1989 and 90, and then 91 it all started to get right, and then 92 we had a one class winner takes all, really. It was in 91 as well.
Yep.
But at that stage, none of us had really got to the TV coverage, just wasn't quite what it was, what it turned out to be. And in Australia, that was live time television from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. The analysis before the race, and then the analysis after it. The interviews with drivers, the in-car camera shots, the stuff that, make legends. Like Dick Johnson was live on TV once, having a conversation with the Prime Minister of Australia, live in the race. As he went through the chase, the rear wing stay broke, flipped the wing off it, and he spun through the chase while he was live talking to the Prime Minister. And he's like this, and oh, God almighty. And it was, that was a bit of a moment.
To be fair, John, you had a bit of a moment in the spotlight, didn't you, on TV?
Yeah, well, when sharing with Brock meant that you had more TV coverage. And bear in mind, at this stage, I hadn't had a lot of TV coverage in the UK. And I'm there with him, and he had cameras in the footwell, he'd one on the dash, he'd one on the roll bar behind here, and we were wired up so that we didn't have to touch anything on the dash, on the steering wheel for the radio. Channel 7 television could hear everything we were saying all of the time. The only time we needed to press the button was if we wanted to talk to the pits. And Brock comes in, does the first stint. So usual story, you've probably done it as well, Guy. You've got the headset on a few laps before he's coming in. How's the car? How's the track? Anything I should watch for? Is everything okay? Yeah, fine. Now, bear in mind, Brock was a guy that could drive a really fast lap of Bathurst with one arm in the window. Super cool guy. Very, very talented. So I said, that's fine. Right, so I get my helmet on, I get in the car, and I up Mountain Straight, and I'm pulling the belts, and I'm getting it all going. Now, bear in mind, we're all wired up, there's cameras everywhere. And I get along the top of the mountain, and I'm back on the radio, and I say, guys, there's either a bad tyre, we've either got a misshaped tyre on the car, or I think there's a bearing, something that's gone. Just ask Brock if everything was okay. Of course, they asked Brock, and he said, well, it's fine when I left it. So I'm over the top of the mountain, down the corkscrew, onto Conrod. Now, on a good lap on Conrod, you do 298 kilometers an hour through the kink. So I'm chucking gears at this thing. And what's happened is Channel 7, the producer, has said, oh, the Brock car's obviously got a problem. Let's go and see if we can listen live to what's happening. So I'm unaware of this, completely unaware of it. So I'm going down Conrod, throwing gears at this thing, and it's 140, 150, 160 miles an hour. Bang! The prop shaft broke and came through the floor. The tail shaft broke, and it started to whirl its way through the floor like a big black snake. And I said, oh, goodness gracious me, I wonder what that was. This thing came at me at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and I used a wee Scottish F word that we use just occasionally, because it went live all over Australia. And there's bits of floor, rubber, prop shaft, everything flying about inside the car. So I kick it out of gear, switch it off, stop everything turning, and bear in mind, I'm doing 150, 60 miles an hour. I've got it through the chase, through the next bit, and I can get down into the pit lane. I'm thinking if I can get to the pit lane, and if I block the pit lane, the team will have to come and push me out, you know, to clear the pit lane. And we were the first garage. Anyway, I had enough momentum to get in the pit box. And I'm about to get out of the car, and the crew said, don't get out, we'll fix it. And I'm looking at this hole in the floor that I could climb out through. And I said, guy, there's a huge hole in the floor here. What do you mean you're going to fix it? We'll fix it. And they did. But I'm sitting there, quietly sort of contemplating it all. And the noise came in my crash helmet again. John, this is Channel 7. We'd like to have a word with you again. Only this time, don't swear. I said, what do you mean? I didn't swear. I haven't talked to you. No, we got all of what just happened up in the mountain there just now. Could you just explain it to the population of Australia that you've just sworn at? So I had to then go on and apologise and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to apologise for being a foul-mouthed Scot. But the one thing that the Aussies love, there's two things they love. One is sport and one is bad language. And when you combine the two, that meant that I have never bought a drink in Australia ever since. I can walk into a bar anywhere in Australia and they go, you're that Scotsman that swore at Bathurst. So it was my introduction to Bathurst was just exactly that. It was fabulous.
So that's why you came back to Britain, to the BTCC, and decided you'd play the theatrics in there as well, John. It all makes sense now.
Well, I figured that I was paid by a manufacturer to do a job of work, which was get publicity for their brand. And it was very much in the days of you win on a Sunday and you sell cars on the Monday. And that was what it was about. I mean, really, probably the best example of that would be Colin McRae. Yeah. Who bought Subarus before Colin McRae won the World Rally Championship? Guys on farms, guys that took a bale of hay down to their sheep. Nobody bought Subarus. They were a terrible thing. Colin won the World Championship. You could not buy a Subaru after that, particularly if it was blue. Yeah. So it was all about win the race, and I think, as probably Steve has said, not at any cost. Win the race. It's good for the manufacturer. They didn't care which driver won the championship. What they wanted was the manufacturer's award at the end of the year. What we wanted was the driver's championship, not the manufacturer's bit. So we were kind of slightly at odds. But Vauxhall would have a full-page advert ready. There was one in particular. I won a bank holiday Monday race at Thruxton, I think it was. And they had the advert already made up. Quicker than the M3 on a bank holiday Monday. And that was their full-page advert that went out in the Daily Express, the Mail, and all of that, because I'd beaten the M3 BMW with this little fleet reps Vauxhall. And that was always how it was looked at, you know. But I figured quite early on that to get publicity, you either have to say or do something that the press and the photographers and the journalists want to come back, go and talk to Cleland. He's always good for a comment. Now, there are times where I regret saying some of the things I've said. One classic one is, I can't remember what year it was. I think it might have been about 91 or 92, thereabouts. And we were on Dunlop tyres on the Cavalier, and I lost the championship. It must have been after that, it must have been 93. And I lost the championship because the tyres were fantastic. We qualifying tyres. We could be on the front row, no problem. But then in the race, they fell off and they just disintegrated. And I told the guy in charge of Dunlop at the time, a nice bloke called Tony Gillam, to shove his tyres where the sun doesn't shine, because it had cost me a championship. Not a bright move, not a bright move, because we had to go back to Dunlop a few years later. And worse than that, one of my races at Bathurst, the car that I went to drive was in Yokohama's, and it wasn't really good on that. And I said, listen, let me go and see if I can buy us some Dunlops for the car, because they'll be better than the Yokos. And I went to the Dunlop guy, who happened to be a Brit, and he said, only if you sign a disclaimer to tell me not to shove them up my ass. And he remembered. So, motorsport is a very small world in many respects. And, what comes around, you got to watch it. You've probably never done anything like that, guy, I'm quite sure. But
I don't know, Jason does seems to have a few stories like that. And I've got it, because we've got so many questions. Normally what we do is we leave them till the end, and then we ask them as a bit of a top-up at the end. But because we've got so many, I've got a few in my mind that as we go through, I'll ask them at sort of what seem like fitting times. Now, Dougie Rankine, who I think you'll probably remember, he used to be the editor of Total Vauxhall magazine.
All right.
Big John Cleland fan. I used to write for Total Vauxhall. I know Dougie very well. So I trust him on this, but he wouldn't tell me any more than just ask John. You said fleet cars, so this came to my mind. Ask him about the Babysitter and the Cavalier GSI 4x4.
Right. As a manufacturer, driver, you get a company car, and it's generally changed twice a year. And my company car was a Cavalier GSI 4-wheel drive, and it was actually sitting down at the Luton factory to be picked up to come home up to me. Jimmy McRae phoned me because he was driving for Opel in Amanta at the time. And Jimmy phoned me and said, your company car's down here. Do you want me to bring it home for you? And I said, yeah, that'd be fine, Jim. What is it? He said, oh, it's a Cavalier all-wheel drive. Yeah, no, that's fine. Good, bring it home. So I get it. It's about, I don't know, the 12th or so of December. And in those days, I was in Round Table. So I'm about to go to the Round Table dinner. And it was black tie job, right? And normally I'd wear my kilt to that, but I wasn't feeling too good. And I said to my wife, listen, I'll not drink tonight. I'll just drink water and I'll drive. And I put my tux on, bow tie, whole lot. Off we go. Now, I lived 4 miles outside the town of Peebles, where this dinner was. So I'm driving my 4-wheel drive Cavalier, babysitter's watching my children. We go into the hotel. We have a great night in the hotel. 5 hours later, I come out and there's a foot of snow, which wasn't there when we went in. And my wife, who's in her ball gown, said, what are we going to do now? I said, it's 4-wheel drive and I'm a racing driver. What do you think we're going to do? We're going home. So we head home, and it's getting, I've only driven it 2 or 3 miles because Jimmy's dropped it off. I've got in it, gone to the dinner, 4 miles down the road, and I'm driving back, and I'm kind of getting the hang of it in the snow, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is okay. So Steph, my wife, went in. I said, put the kettle on, I'll be right back. Now I'm still in my tux. And the wee babysitter, she'd lived on a farm up the road. Well, I'd never been there before. And she was sitting all night with little wooden shaped sheep, and she was wrapping them with wool to sell them at some Christmas fair. And she had a massive Tupperware box with about 400 of these sheep that she'd made while she was babysitting. And she's got them on her knee. Now I'm getting cocky. And I'm going a bit quicker than you know, probably should have been. And I said, where do you live anyway? She says, oh, if you just turn here and you go straight up, and it was a single track farm road. The higher I'm going, the worse the snow's getting. It is now Arctic conditions. It's blowing a gale. So all of a sudden the lights come through the snow and I can see a fence right in front of me. And I thought, this isn't going to end well. So I could see a big straining post on the fence. And I thought, if I can chuck it sideways, hit the straining post, at least I won't go in the field. So I missed the straining post. And the next thing, it's rolling over on itself. Babysitter inside, me in my dinner jacket. It ends up upside down, right? So the first thing I've said is, I can't remember her name, Fiona. Let's say her name was Fiona. I said, are you okay, first of all? Yes, yeah, I think so. Secondly, don't take your seatbelt off because we're upside down and you'll hit the roof, right? So I lean down and I pull on the interior light, and her Tupperware box of 400 woolly sheep are now running about the roof of the inside of this Cavalier. No time had passed, no time at all. I think I'm in a field. All of a sudden, there's a torch shines in the window. I wasn't in a field at all. I was in her dad's front lawn. I had rolled the car right onto the front lawn. If I had gone 3 more feet, I'd have been in the living room watching the telly with him. And it was him that came out with the torch to see where his daughter was. So I'm busy saying, she's okay, honest, she's fine. Let me get your sheep and put them in her wee box. She never ever babysat for us again.
I bet they tell that story though.
Well, they tell that story all the time. But the funniest thing was the next morning, I phoned up my boss at the time. It wasn't Mike Nicholson, it was John Nixie, who was the sort of competition manager. And I phoned him up and I said, John, I don't know what Jimmy McRae did to that car of mine when he left Luton, but the roof's buggered on it. I think it's going to need a body shell. So it was junk, absolutely junk. They had to take it back and give me another one.
Well, thank you, Dougie, because I did trust you on that one. It turned out to be a fantastic anecdote, like you promised it would be. I'm glad we had that little tangent there, and we'll do that throughout this. But so what year were we at? We were at 89, weren't we? We were just going into the touring cars and
Well, 89 was when the championship really kicked off, and I had been pestering Vauxhall because I looked at the championship rules and I thought it's only ever been won from the lower classes. Bill McGovern in an imp, what do you call them, in a Toyota Corolla. There was lots of people had won it from the lower classes. And I thought, well, we've got a 2-litre Astra coming. We could make that a touring car because they were already rallying it in World Rally with Louise Aiken Walker and Malcolm Wilson as the driver. So all we could do was decant a lot of the bits, put some proper suspension on it, get Mike Pilbeam to do some proper suspension, and let's go. And it was a guy called Dave Cook Racing up in Yorkshire, who was really the brains behind the whole thing. He had done the Carlton, he looked after Carlton and the Senator, and he'd been given the task of making this little Astra ready for the track. And because we were using a lot of rally gearbox, X-Track gearbox, and the engine that they produced for that, with some bespoke stuff from Mike Pilbeam for the suspension, it worked really well. And I think we won 12 of the 13 races, or 13 of the 14 or whatever. And it was only because it threw a conrod or something like that that we didn't win the next one. But the year after that, Vauxhall decided, right, we've won the championship. We need to do this in a bigger style. And they wanted to go with the Cavalier, which was the new car for them. And I've actually got a quote here. I'll not tell you, a very famous person quoted for it. £465,900 to do the whole season. To build 2 race cars was £137,000. 4 engines at 15 grand an engine. And the whole lot was 465 grand. Wow. 1990. The car I own is a 1997 Vectra that my son Jamie forced me to buy a few years ago. And AAA saw it after we'd rebuilt it, Ian Harrison of AAA. And he came up and he said, do you know how much we charged Vauxhall for your car and Derek's car? No. 385 grand each. That's what they were. You could have done an entire season in 1990, roughly for the same money. Wow. For two cars. It was amazing. But Dave Cook brought a true Yorkshire style to it, where he had a lady up in Sheriff Hutton who used to make Yorkshire pie and curries and all sorts in little trays. We'd put the tail lift of the truck down, we had a microwave, and that's what we did for our catering in 1989 and 1990. No fancy motorhomes and awnings and all that. Let's just go with a Dave Cook curry. It was fine.
Who would be your team? Jeff Allen, your team. When did Jeff Allen join? Was that then?
It was in 90. It was either 90 or 91 that he came in, and Jeff was really he was the famous guy, because I'd only won a thing in 1989. Jeff had been driving for Tom Walkinshaw in the Rovers along with Steve, and he'd won all sorts of things. I think he'd come second at Bathurst as well back then. He'd been in Spa 24 hours, Nürburgring 24 hours, a proper well-known name. He'd been in the British Touring Car Championship at some stage previously, and he was a Vauxhall dealer. And probably the best teammate I've ever had, without doubt, because we're about the same age. And he and I we'd share information. You know, we weren't trying to beat each other. And that's the worst thing, Guy, when you've got a teammate who's trying to, your biggest opposition is the guy in the other car on the other side of the garage. And you want to try and beat him all the time. And it's slightly counterproductive when, as a manufacturer with two cars, you're trying to win a championship for both drivers and the manufacturer. You've got to work together. And Jeff and I did that really well. We would share information. I would beat him at certain places, and he would beat me at other places. Fortunately, I beat him more often than he beat me. But it was just, he was a great teammate, and he had the knowledge of having worked with people like Tom Walkinshaw in a much bigger team. So he could bring lots of really useful information about how we move forward with this. Yeah. So he was a great teammate to have.
Actually, it sort of answers one of the questions, Paul, we've got here. Is Chris Hutchinson on Twitter. His question was, who was your favourite and least favourite teammate? So I guess we've got the favourite teammate out of the way.
Yep.
Yeah, I've had a few teammates in my life, but I had...
You didn't get along with? And one of the questions was, how was James Thompson when he joined the team? Was he good to work with or hard work?
Yeah. You know, the best thing about James Thompson was, James came to work for Vauxhall, I think, when he was 20, a super talented little driver. He was 20, I'm sure it was. The good thing about having a 20-year-old was that all these young girls would follow him run about. And they used to bring their mothers, and their mothers were more my age. So, I mean, that was fine. But he was a young kid in a hurry. Yeah. He came from a wealthy background. His father had been into rallying in a big way. Yeah, and
he was quite Dave Cook, wasn't he, as well?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, big mate of cookies. Because they were all from that sort of part of Yorkshire. And I mean, James was a really, really talented, quick little driver, but he was in too much of a hurry. And I remember the very first test I think we ever did with him was down at Nagaro in Gascony. And he went out, I'd gone and done some laps in the car, and Nagaro's quite a twisty bit of track. And James was a left foot braker. And after about 2 laps, he came in, the brakes were on fire. And my engineer was a guy called Phil Barker. And he had James in tears. He told him that if he set the car on fire again, he was going to send him on a plane home. And he had to get the hang of left foot braking's fine, but don't kill the car by doing it. But the kid learned, and he absolutely for sure was, he was a bit of a pest. When I needed to pull the stops out, I had to work really hard to beat him sometimes. But was he the worst? I've had some challenging ones. Ivan Muller.
Yeah.
He comes in with multiple ice racing championships behind him. Car control, the like of which I don't think anybody's seen. And today he still is capable of pedaling a car really well. But he's French, and he had a French engineer, and they tended to speak a little bit in French. And of course, we didn't quite get that. And he had a different style of driving to I did. He loved like full opposite lock with a front wheel drive car. And my thing with a front wheel drive car is I had to get away with this, get rid of the understeer, but I didn't particularly like masses of oversteer either. Muller could drive it on the doorstops and still produce a time. Yeah. But I realized quite quickly there was no way I was going to beat him. I just had to sort of hang really close to him. And if I could get within a tenth or so of him, I was pretty happy with that, really, because I was getting to the other end of my life as a touring car driver, and he was just starting his. Yeah. The other one I had was Derek Warwick in the Cavalier, in the Vectra. And Derek's about the same age as me, another car dealer, really good sense of humour, good fun. It used to be a competition to get to the hotel first, to see who could get the best hotel room with Derek. It was always a competition. It wasn't about, let's see who's fastest on the track. It was a competition everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It was a race to go to the toilet in the morning, everything about him.
So John, I was interested to hear, from a driver's point of view, you mentioned about Ivan Muller being a left foot braker. Are you a left foot braker or a right foot braker?
Right foot braker. In fact, it's quite interesting that I've never left foot braked. I never felt the necessity to it. Pentti Aricola, the late Pentti Aricola, that was one of Vauxhall's rally drivers, kept trying to tell Vauxhall that if he let me and Jeff Allen go on one of his courses to teach us left foot braking, we'd be 2 seconds a lap faster. And we're like, yeah, right then. That was never going to happen. But Alan Menu, who is regarded by many as one of the best front-wheel drive touring car drivers in the world, bar none, he's right foot braking. He doesn't left foot brake. And it's a really interesting concept because a number of years ago, I did the Race of Champions in Gran Canaria. And I was out there to race Wayne Gardner, who got stranded at an airport, and I ended up racing Harry Toivonen, the late Henry's big brother. Again, a very funny bloke. But what do you call her? Michel Mouton said to me, do you want to sit in while the World Rally guys are practicing? I said, yeah, go on, let me. So I sat in this Toyota Celica World Rally car, and I didn't get out of it for hours. Stig Blomqvist, Mickey Biasion, Carlos Sainz, etc. Every world rally driver that there was, Ari Vatanen, you just name them, I sat beside them. And I don't think I looked out the window once. I was watching their feet and the way they were working the gear lever. Some used left foot braking, some used right foot braking, some used both. Mickey Biasion he won the event that weekend, but Mickey Biasion was right foot brake, very gentle on the car. Stig Blomqvist was the most brutal, bang, 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 you stand on its nose, every gear, every brake, and everything you could possibly do to upset the car. The times were this close. It didn't matter whether they had right foot, left foot, both feet, or no feet. They would produce the same time. So really, sometimes you would left foot just to settle the car in a corner. But no, I don't use it as a brake. I use it as a settler, not to brake. But I suppose you guys in the Bentley and things like that do, you know?
No, to be fair, it's interesting. I mean, I class myself as being old school because when I first learned to race, it was Formula Ford, Formula First. It was H pattern box, so you had to heel and toe. So the first thing I learned was going up and down the runway, heel and toe, and doing the blips and things like that. And I'm quite proud of it now that I can still, that I still can do that, because not many people can't.
No.
Like now, all the kids, they just learn with, the old left foot brake and just bang it down, which is fine. And I'm just curious to know, because, I always right foot brake, sometimes in the rally car, left foot brake, but predominantly right foot braking is the best way for me. But yeah, I was interested, because I always thought with front wheel drive that you had to kind of left foot brake, and that was the way that you did it. But hearing you say that just surprises me. And
no, not at all, because I mean, James Thompson was a front left foot braker, and he and I could produce exactly the same lap time within a thousandth of a second. But you could, if you put the lap over each other, he would be better there, I would be better there, he'd be better there, I'd be better there. But when you got to the start finish line again, it was a thousandth of a second. You just achieved it in slightly different ways. Whatever suits the driver best. I mean, I know more people nowadays are left foot braking, mainly because they've come from karting and things like that. But what, in a touring car, you never used the clutch except to leave the start line. After that, you never touched it. Occasionally, I would help it down the gearbox with the clutch, just to give the gearbox half a chance.
Or so, if it's wet or something like that, where you kind of, or whatever else you might
don't upset it too much. And just
in the V8, did you have to use the clutch or not on downshift? Or
on the downshift, you didn't have to. In fact, the V8s didn't like it. But what you had to be really careful with the V8 was, you've got to get the revs absolutely right with them. Otherwise, the back of the car wants to dance around far too much. And they're a pretty heavy big car. So when you get on it, you had to be really gentle with them. You couldn't bang down the gearbox and come out of the hairpin or come out of a tight corner and then jump on the throttle. If you watch any in-car stuff from V8s in Australia, the right foot is gently feeding in the power all the time. It's not an animal that you can give it a kick for the throttle or it just spit you off the track.
I guess once you start spinning the wheels, the tires are going to go off anyway. So it's just kind of trying to drive, to the level of the grip.
Maximize the grip that you possibly get.
So would you consider yourself a smooth driver, like a pretty smooth kind of driver, or not?
Hang on. How many wheels are we talking?
Of course, I'm a smooth driver.
There's aggressive and smooth.
Hang on. Sorry, Steve Soper's on the phone. He's got an answer for this guy.
Hang on, I'll phone him. Steve. No, I think.
Surprise! We've got Steve on the line.
I think I've got. I think I'm fairly smooth because I realise on a touring car you only have little narrow tyres, and if you upset it, you've got a 975 kilos worth of car, 300-ish brake horsepower. You've got to maximise the speed through the corners. You've got to do all that well. And if I got out of a car after, back when I was doing it properly, if I got out of a car, I never looked like I wasn't red like a little lobster. I could get out of the car and make the car do the work. I'm not muscling it all the time. I could do it with my fingertips. So to make it nice and smooth, it's much less effort on the driver. It's much less painful on the car and the tyres. And that was what was important.
Yeah, brilliant.
So we're getting close to the year. It must be funny. You could achieve all this in your career. And the first thing that people want to hear about is this story. We're getting close to the year. And it's funny you talk about teammates working well together, because you saw how well the BMW teammates would work together in 92, didn't you?
That was
talk us into that, John, because
I struggle to understand. I mean, I've come second at Bathurst. I've raced in the World Cup 2 or 3 times. I've won 2 championships, but everybody just wants to know what happened 28 years ago.
Hearts and minds, and you were winning with things like that.
Yeah, I'll tell you something that's not common knowledge was that 92, BMW had ABS on these Listerine cars, and nobody else had ABS braking. And we were trying to develop ABS on the Dave Cook car. And we were testing, and this was actually the very last open test that touring cars ever did because of what happened. We were testing at Donington prior to the Donington race there in a general test day, because it was before the days of Alan Gauss saying, right, this is our test day now, out. We were in there with everything, single seaters, all sorts. And I was testing ABS on this thing. It's wet, I'm going down the craners. There's a single seater in front of me, didn't see me, pulled over as I was going to pass him. So I had to go on the grass. The car will not lock the brakes because the ABS is on. And I can't lean over and switch the bloody thing off. So I'm traveling at unabated speed down towards the old hairpin. The wall in those days was much closer to the track. And I hit the wall head on. I couldn't spin it. I couldn't get it to do anything. I hit it head on. And I had a microphone in my crash helmet for talking to Murray Walker. And as I did that, before the days of Hans devices, this microphone broke my sternum. And the accident where I'd hit the barrier broke my lower back. So I broke 2 vertebrae in my back and my sternum. And this is a fortnight or 3 weeks before the penultimate round at Donington. And I ended up in the hospital in Nottingham for a few days. It was pretty bloody painful. And while I was in there, my mobile rang, and it was Keith Green, who ran the Renault team, who was about to run the Renault team in the following year. No, sorry. Yes, it was. Keith Green phoned me to say, would you drive the Renault that we're coming to the championship with next year? This is the deal, this is how much it is. And I said, well, I'm in a hospital bed at the minute. I'd like to get the championship finished and done with, and then I'll come back to you. But the Renault drive that Harvey subsequently took, I turned down. Prior to that, 91, Vic Lee pestered the living daylights of me at the tail end of 91 to drive with Steve in the Listerine cars. He pestered the life out of me, and I said, no, Steve's the BMW man. He's the superstar in Germany. He will get the preferential treatment. I'm the kid from the north. I'm not really going to get the fair treatment here. So, Vic, thanks for the offer, but I think I'll just stick with Vauxhall. No. And he did a complicated deal where if I won the championship, I got X amount. And if I didn't win the championship, I got more. He was actually going to pay me more not to win the championship than he was to win it. So I said, no, Vic, no, I'm going to stick with Vauxhall, but thanks anyway. So the car that Harvey won the championship with, I turned it down. It was mine. So after the incident at Donington, I'm in a hospital. I go back to the race that weekend, and the little doctor there who had been attending me in the hospital anyway was sticking jags in my front and in my back so I could do the race. Got a little bit better. Had I not been leading the championship, I'd have gone home. I just said, no, enough's enough. I'm going home. But I was leading the championship, and I felt I could still do it if they could just keep giving me the jags. And we got to Silverstone, and they gave me the jags again. And I had sort of padding up in my shoulders here for the seat belts. And it's amazing how adrenaline can dissipate the pain. But what happened really was, had I been fit as a fiddle, I probably wouldn't have done some of the things I did. So the fact that I did that to Steve, that must have been the drugs I was on. Maybe.
It wasn't quite how Murray Walker put it, was it?
Yeah, but you see, I'm going to sell T-shirts. One of them is this, and the other one is The Man's an Animal. And I've got a couple of others to do with the Mansell race. And we're actually going to come out with T-shirts quite soon after all these years. So you want to buy a T-shirt, give me a shout.
We do need to ask a question on that one, actually, because who was it that said about the man? I mean, lots of people asked about the man's animal. Oh, Ian Abbott on Twitter. Do you still think Steve Soper is an animal?
No, as I said to you, I think what people don't realise was that Steve and I did the Will Hire 24 Hours twice. About 10 years before that, 1982, I think we did it. Myself, Steve, and Tiffany Dell did it one year. And the second year, I can't remember who was in the car with us. So I knew Steve, and I'd known Steve for 10 years. And, I think he said in his podcast that I phoned him the night before the tribunal, and we both employed barristers at great expense. And I wasn't going to get back what I thought was mine. Steve was potentially going to lose his license and maybe his job. And it was just going to drag it through the courts. And I said, nah, enough's enough. And I phoned him and said, Steve, listen to this. And I did hear he said he didn't trust me. But there again, that's just one car dealer to another not trusting them.
I think there's a lot of mutual respect there, to be fair. I think a lot of respect there.
But joking aside, to be famous,
he's not an animal as far as I'm concerned. He did a job, and he explained to me many, many years afterwards. And bear in mind that from 1989 with the Astra, it was me and a BMW. 90, me and a BMW. 91, me and a BMW. All the way through, it was me and a BMW. What I didn't know was it wasn't Vic Lee that had tried to get me in the car. Steve said it was Germany. Germany told Vic to employ you to get you off the other side of the fence, get you in a BMW. And if I'd known that it was coming from Munich and not from Vic, not that I don't trust Vic, because Vic ran a really good show, one way or another. But had I known it was BMW, I'd have signed. I would absolutely have signed, because with Vauxhall, they were good to me, and they were a UK manufacturer, whereas BMW was a global player. And when Steve packed in touring cars, he went off and did Le Mans. Now, that's the one that got away from me. I would love to have done Le Mans. I went there in 1975 or something to spectate, just as, a Billy Boat, just somebody with a tent and a rucksack. It never occurred to me that I should go and try and drive there, because, like Soper, Anthony Reid, Tim Harvey, Tiffany Dell, lots of the guys I was against had gone and done it. It never occurred to me. It didn't excite me then, but I realise now that I should have tried to go with BMW and maybe in the future do Le Mans. That would have been nice.
Aside though, John, with this catchphrase, there are very few racing drivers. I mean, I'm a huge motorsport fan, and people like me remember very few racing drivers for the quotes that they made. Ayrton Senna springs to mind straight away. The going for the line, you're not a racing driver if the racing is life, everything else. Steve McQueen with the racing is life, everything else is just waiting. There are very few, and you're right up there in the top 3 or 4, regardless of what kind of motor racing fan you talk to. And joking aside, that is quite a legacy in this world of overindulged media, and there's just stuff everywhere, and everywhere's oversaturated. For people to remember those pinprick moments and still have it in their mind, and the anchor is this catchphrase. Yeah. That's fantastic, I think.
It's actually quite unbelievable. And an event somewhere in the last handful of years, after I'd stopped touring car racing properly, a guy came up and asked me if I would sign his arm. And when he rolled his sleeve up, he's got David Coulter's, this guy was a Scotsman, obviously. He's got Coulter's crash helmet here, and he's got my Cavalier, and he's got the man's an animal tattooed underneath it. And he's asked me to sign his arm. He's already got all my catchphrases on there already.
It doesn't surprise me. It does not surprise me. The first thing I mentioned to my mates that you guys are coming on, Steve Soper and then you. And the first thing they all said, text message, in person or whatever, the guys at the circuit, Andy Willoughby, our maintenance foreman, he was like, ask him if the man's an animal. The first thing they say. Brilliant.
Chris Phillips on Twitter said the crash that concluded the BTC 1992. He said, "Do you think it was the making of the BTCC as it is today, with more people following the sport? And do you ever tire about talking about what happened in that race?"
Answer the second part of that first. I think it's quite humorous. It was pretty serious. I mean, it took me a wee while to talk to Steve properly after it. I still I still wouldn't go to dinner with Tim Harvey to this day, but I would go to dinner with Steve Soper. That year, Jim Bamber did a great cartoon, and it was a bonfire, and on the bonfire was the Listerine BMW. And there's a picture of me round the corner, and I've got Steve, and I'm saying, Steve, no hard feelings. I'd like to invite you to my barbecue. And that was the cartoon that Jim Bamber did. And that's another one I'm going to put on a t-shirt. But it was, I sent that Christmas, I made that into a Christmas card. I got Jim's permission to do it. And I sent that out as a Christmas card that year to everybody that I could possibly think on. So yes, I still enjoy talking about it because the hard feelings to some extent have gone, and it's, you know, as long as somebody remembers me for something interesting, then that's fine. But had I been a chunk older, I might have used a bad word. Whereas then I was a young lad and I wasn't into swearing that much. So it's just as well, otherwise nobody would have been able to use it.
I hear as well, Adam Little on Instagram, were there any offers to come back racing after retirement?
I retired at the end of '99 for a number of reasons. One, I'd been in touring cars such a long time. I knew that there was a change needed. I wanted at that stage to go and do some sports car racing. I'd driven a Porsche, 911, whatever it was. I'd done a few races in that, and we'd done quite well. Then I ended up sharing a Viper with a guy called Dave Clark, and it was all going fine. And then I was at Brands qualifying one day, and I got a phone call to say that my father was really unwell, and I had to get home. And the late Neil Cunningham ended up subbing for me that day. And after that, I gave up because my father was, as I said, he was my biggest fan. He was my biggest supporter. We ran a business, a car dealership. And if I wasn't at the dealership, he was. So to make the dealership operate, I really had to give up what I was doing and go back and concentrate 100% on that. And actually, 95, when I won the championship in the Cavalier, and Ray Mallock couldn't quite understand me because I was a joker as far as he was concerned. I was the guy who would carry on behind everybody's back and, you know, do stupid things. But actually, when I pull my crash helmet on, I'm a different person. But I just think sometimes if you can't laugh at yourself, then you're a sad person. Yeah. But, you know, Ray had worked previously with people like David Leslie and Anthony Reid, who are were very, and in Anthony's case, technical, and David's case was even more technical. I'm a driver. I don't get paid to engineer the car. Ray liked to do all that, you know, a bit of this and 2 clicks of that, and a wee bump of that, and let's try a pink one instead of a blue one. Just give me the car, let me drive it. And that's what you're paying an engineer the big bucks for. Yeah. I'll come in and tell him, and he'll be able to see it on the stopwatch before I come in anyway, because that was something I pride myself in, is consistency. And if I went out testing, I'll punch in laps within 100th of a second of each other. You make an adjustment to the car, I'll see it in half a lap or at worst a lap, and I'll come in and tell you. I won't tell you how to cure it, but I'll tell you it's better, worse, or whatever. Yeah. And that's the job of the engineer in my experience. So anyway, Ray didn't quite understand that. So I went down to him at the start of '95, and I went to his farmyard where he was doing all the cars in those days. And I said, Ray, great, I'm looking forward to this. I tested the car at Brands, and we were just, it was incredible. It was the first year of spoilers and aerofoil and wings on the back, and it was Michelin tires. And I did a couple of laps, and I came in and I said to my engineer, Phil Barker, Phil, that's pretty good. I said, but the dash isn't working. I'm not getting any times. He said, well, you're quickest by about 3/4 of a second a lap. And that was in the Brands Indy track. I said, oh, right, okay, maybe I'll go and start trying now. Anyway, we ended up the day fastest. I said to him, wash it, polish it, and bring it back to the next race. We'll win this championship. I went to Ray Mallock and said, Ray, I'm really serious about this. I will win this championship, trust me. give me Phil Barker as an engineer, because up to that point, he was engineering me. I said, give me Phil Barker as an engineer and I'll win you this championship. I guarantee you. What I'll do is I'll go home. I'll employ a manager to run my business while I'm not there. And we'll go and do it. And we did. And we won the championship. And I went home after having been to Australia to do Bathurst. I was back and forward a lot of the time, and I was on the phone and I'm looking at, information from my general manager and thinking, he tells me it's going okay. I come home, I drive around the corner, and I look at my forecourt and I look at the stock, and I then look at the bank account and think, holy moly, what's he done to me? And he nearly put me out of business. So he got fired within 24 hours, and I had to get my sleeves rolled up again and go back into the business. So I'd won a championship, but it very nearly cost me the business. It took me a few years. In fact, I threw an awful lot of the salary from Vauxhall at my business to keep it afloat, because my general manager screwed it up for me royally, and he was lying to me when I should have dug deeper. But hey, you learn. But overall, I'm still here.
But that year, John, as I said earlier, for me as a fan at that point, I was drawing. I've got a picture I drew when I was however old I was in '95, 11 years old or whatever. And I drew a picture of your car along with a lot of the other cars on the grid, because that was peak touring car. The cars, look, my dad had a white Cavalier as a company car. And I can still remember the registration on that car. And because it was a white Cavalier and the white Cavalier won the championship, those were the days. Yeah. And the win on Sunday, the buy on Monday, and your dad's cool because he drives the same car as John Cleland.
Well, I was so confident that I could win the championship. Ladbrokes at the time were attending the track, and you could bet on the outcome of the races. I was so the first race was at Donington on the big track, I think, and it was in the big track at Donington. I was so confident I got somebody to go and put money on myself to win both races, and the way I'd done the bet, I'd have got 40 grand, right? So at the time, that was pretty good because we were getting fairly strong money to drive the cars anyway, but another 40 grand for a day's work would have been quite nice. I'd always joked with the people at Vauxhall, my team, and the managing director of Vauxhall, who I still get on really well with. If I see that Volvo in the mirror, I'm going to have to let it through because I'm a Volvo dealer, and I'll sell more cars on Monday morning. I might not win the race, but I'll have to let it through because I'll sell a lot more cars. And it was tongue-in-cheek, right? Only he didn't take it that way. So first race, Donington, I win it. Rickard Rydell is second by this much. Second race, Rickard wins it, and I'm second by this much. So I didn't get my 40 grand, but I've still got the betting slip in my racing overalls pocket. And my boss came up after the race, and I'm quite happy having won the first race and come second. He said, you let that Volvo win? I said, no. Why? What makes you think that? He said, well, you've always said that, if it was that close, you'd let it win, you'd sell more cars. I said, no, and I went in my overall pocket and pulled out the betting slip, and I said, look, I got 40 grand if I'd beat the bloody thing. What chance do you think I'm going to let it through? So that was a great championship, great year, and it was one to look back on, because when in '89 to win the championship and to have the trophy with Jim Clark's name on it was super important to me, because Jim Clark won it in the 60s, and my name is now on that same trophy twice. And for me, that was the most important thing. I'd felt in '89, because I'd won it from the classes, and I'd probably the highest I'd ever been was 12th or 13th or something. I'd cheated. I'd won a championship, but I'd never won a race. How can that be? Which was the whole concept of TOCA, one class, one winner, one championship winner. And that's in 1995 when I won it against, Alan Menu in a fully funded Williams Renault, Rickard Rydell in a fully funded Tom Walkinshaw Volvo. I felt really proud of myself that year that we'd done a great job. We'd won, we'd done enough, and when we didn't need to do any more, we just banked the points to do the job. But I won quite a number of races in the middle of the year, And that helped the whole series. That helped the whole championship.
You must have felt the excitement as well that year, because if you look at any of the races, it's just a sea of people, and it became such a huge thing from that year onwards. Really, a little bit before perhaps, but it really did seem to ramp up, didn't it?
Yeah. To go back, you asked a question about '92. Did that incident with Steve put touring cars on the map? I think there wasn't a huge amount going on that weekend, so we ended up on the front pages of newspapers. We've ended on the front page of Motorsport, Motoring News, Autosport, Autocar. I think I've still got them all in my office somewhere. Regardless of what the outcome eventually was, it just became, wow, did you see that race at the weekend? These touring car guys, they're bonkers. You have to watch them races. They're great fun. And Murray makes great comments about losing bumpers and wing mirrors and all of that. And people who go to these races are excited, and it's actually quite bad, because they go to see cars having accidents. They go to see cars losing panels and crashing into each other. They don't go to see the best driven car win a race by a country mile. That doesn't excite them. They like to see pushing and shoving and bashing each other for 10th and 11th place.
Two wheels.
Back then as well, all the drivers, you had all the manufacturers, but all the drivers were superstars. There was you guys, there's people like, Winkelhock, Brabham was in there, Rivalia, BMW, all these great names. And I remember, I think I was racing like Formula Renault at the time, 95. And as soon as the touring cars, the BTC cars were on, you'd be straight to the fence, to watch the race. Knockhill, seeing the cars going over the chicanes on two wheels, I mean, just so much fun to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it was, we were all getting paid pretty handsomely. And there was, 10, 11, 12 manufacturers at some point. But you're talking, there's 24 proper factory cars with paid professional drivers, many Frank Villa, who became a multiple Le Mans winner, Pirro, Ravaglia, as you say, Tarquini. All of these guys who were big names in their own right in Formula One. Joe Winkelhock had done Formula One. Derek Warwick had done Formula One. There's been a huge chunk of ex-Formula One, ex-world sports car drivers coming to touring cars, because there was more guys being paid to drive tin tops than there were in Formula One. Now, I know that sports cars today is a little bit different, but in those days, I was enjoying myself that much. I'd have done it for nothing. I just wasn't going to tell the nice man at Vauxhall that.
The TV coverage was the thing as well. I mean, I never actually got to any actual touring car races in those years when I was a kid, but we used to religiously watch it. And I even remember the end of year sum up on, was it Grandstand then?
Yeah.
Was Tarquini's accident over the closing credits where he barrel rolls the Alpha, and it was Oasis, Roll With It was the music. And in my head, that's still there. And I don't remember the music that was playing over the credits of last year's touring cars or last year's Formula One, or it's just.
Can I tell you, who have you any idea who caused the Tarquini accident at Knockhill?
Are we
Tim
looking?
Harvey.
Who?
Tim Harvey.
Was it?
He punted him.
Did he?
If you ask, you won't get Tim to admit that, but if you go back and watch that, you watch Tarquini, Tim Harvey punted him driving the Renault that day, straight up the bottom, whack, on its roof.
On the roof and everywhere else.
Another piece of useless information.
So, John, do you know where your 1995 car is today? Someone's asked the question.
Yeah. Yep. It's it belongs to a gentleman who actually has 3 or 4 of them. Yeah. He was partly involved with Ray Mallock. In fact, I think he was very heavily involved with Ray Mallock in the business. Did a bit of Le Mans, and he owns both the cars. And he asked me, would I buy it back a number of years ago? But I always remembered it as being a great car. It obviously was a good car, but something I had in my head that it was quite a technical wee car in some respects. And I sat in it at Goodwood a number of years ago, and I think it had a dash, it had a PI dash, and about 3 switches, and an adjuster for the brake balance. There was nothing fancy about it. It had nothing. It even had wind-up rear windows, which we used the windows at the back to balance the aero on the car. Depending on what track we were on, we'd either wind the windows up or down to give the back of the car, you'd either stabilize it or make it more loose. And we would use the back windows for that. It was such a fine balance. So yes, I do know what it is, and it's too expensive, and I don't want to buy it back.
Oh, but that brings us on nicely to the one you did buy back, John, which I remember talking to you about this, and I remember you one quote, and I said this to my mate Tom the other day. I said, John told me he'd only race it as long as he could still get parts, because he didn't want to go and do processions, because that's what Goodwood was for. Remember you telling me that at Alton Park at the Gold Cup?
Yep. And that Gold Cup event, I think I ended up rushing down to get a part made, borrowed off the Derek Warwick car, which I just happened to know what it was. The trouble with these cars was, in the money, the budgets at the tail end, 99, for the Ford Mondeos, was something like 10 million. Vauxhall, I think, was spending 5-6 million. The guys in the middle were spending just humongous sums of money. You'd have the cars was one thing, then you'd have the best transport, then you'd have the best motorhome, then you'd have the carbon fibre pit trolleys. And it was never ending. And we did it because you could, because the manufacturers were right in there and it was the place to be. But the bubble was always going to burst. And when I jumped in 99, 2000 was about the last real year. And then it virtually died for a number of years because the manufacturers all left to do something else. So the money involved is colossal. So the 96 car Vectra was completely different to a 97 car, completely different to a 98 car, in as much as one was left-hand drive, one was right-hand drive. That alone. But there were so many bits and pieces that weren't interchangeable. So when I bought the one I have today, my son Jamie put it together. Now, when I was racing it for 888, Jamie was, I think, 9 or something, 8 or 9, and he would run in and out of the pit garages at 888, stealing Mars bars and cans of Coke. And he said recently, he says, if I'd known we were going to buy this back, he said, I've been stealing uprights and discs and calipers. But we've done a good job of hoovering up Vauxhall parts from all around the world at the minute. We've found a guy in Sweden, we could buy an engine and a brand new Vauxhall X-Track gearbox with a price tag still on it in the box. So we bought everything, and I sent a van out.
You've even bought shirts and the hoardings out of the pit garages and things. It's all the proper setup, isn't it? You've got the proper Vauxhall Motorsport gear on. Yeah. Even when you're doing tyres, on the picture we put up, you've got the Vauxhall on the collar.
Well, what we did was, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it right. So we bought the car. Then Jamie found me the ex-Aston Martin test team truck, a proper job. So we've got that. So it's got the office and all the stuff and a fancy awning. Then we went to 888 and bought all the flooring, which was red. Then we created all the bullshit boarding. And then we went out and bought, or had some shirts printed that looked exactly like what we did back in 1997. Yeah. So we did a bit of retro job on it. And yeah, it was a bit of fun. And my kids were growing up through all of my professional time as a driver. And I probably didn't see as much of them. But Nicky, the eldest, and Jamie, the youngest, the three of us would go away and we'd race at Alton Park or Thruxton or whatever with the car. They'd look after it, I'd drive it. Because I had my turn at looking after Jamie when he was racing Clios, or Nicky when he was rallying Subarus. Yep. So it was their turn to help me a wee bit. And it was a bit of a family event. It was really good fun.
So who was working on your D-Type Jaguar when I saw you drive around the rally stage in Duns on the Jim Clark in it? It must have been 2011 or 2012.
Yeah, that's right. That was, well, Nicky, my eldest son, he was with me and he was driving a Jaguar with Louise Aiken Walker in it that day. Right. And I had some Polish journalists with me, but yeah, that's a good old car.
The coverage and turned round and there's John Cleland, my touring car hero, jumping out of a blue D-Type Jaguar with a flat cap on, I think, at the time.
Yeah, it was. There's a D-Type that I bought a number of years ago, and it doesn't get out very often, but it's a bit of fun.
Is it a proper one?
Sadly not. It's about 5 million quid short of the real one. But if the real one drove past you and then I drove past you, you'd be hard pushed to tell the difference. And I don't care. Mine looks just as good.
Yeah. What other cars have you got in the collection, John?
Well, I've had various Aston Martins and a load of Jaguars over the years, but I'm down to just a few race cars. I've got one race car which is an Opel Monza, and it's exactly 40 years ago I did the Tourist Trophy race, which was for the European Touring Car Championships at BMWs and all of that. Steve, I think, did it in a Rover in that year. And I was sharing with a guy called Jeremy Rossiter, who used to own SPAC shock absorbers.
Okay.
And Jeremy and I drove this Opel Monza, and it died. And it burned, it boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled. I put it in the truck, brought it home, put it in my father's garage. And when I was clearing the garage out a year or so ago there, here's this old thing lying under a sheet. So we've got it back, we've got it stripped, and it's probably the only one in captivity. So we're going to build it back up to full group, I think it was group A or group 2 specification, because it'll get an invite to Goodwood, Portimao, anywhere there's a classic event, this will be able to get an invite, because there's not another one.
Fantastic.
So Paul, should we go for some quick fire questions?
I think we should just scan down those questions that we got asked, though, because there'll be a lot of people fierce that we did. Oh, there's one that I did want to ask, actually, which this was from Mand on Twitter. How was the rear-wheel drive Cavalier to drive, and why was it not raced?
The rear-wheel drive Cavalier, I think, ran, if my memory serves me right, as car number 50, and we used a BMW back axle in it, and I think it was a BMW gearbox, possibly. The reason we didn't race it, it was a beautifully balanced car, because we then spread the weight a little bit better, and it was a beautifully balanced car. But because you're talking about 1990, the technology in drive, diffs, and all of that wasn't what it ultimately became. And you've got a diff, then it's driving through a 90 degrees, the gearbox, and then the engine's sitting this way. It's not even sitting north and south, it's sitting east and west. All the drain on the power through the transmission, the gearbox and everything, it was, I don't know, 2-3 seconds a lap slower than it needed to be. And the other thing was, other than BMW, there was nobody doing rear-wheel drive. You wouldn't take BMW on at their own game, would you? No. I mean, we had to beat them in another way. So to concentrate on the front-wheel drive, the weight was 975 for the BMW was 1,000 or something like that. So we gave it up quite quickly. It was quite evident that it was never going to be a goer.
And there was one other question. I can't remember who asked it now, but this was on Facebook, on a Facebook post. Do you regret the way the touring cars went with the aero and the big money? Do you regret that? Do you wish it had stayed more low key with the non-aero and keeping the budgets low?
No, because the 94 was the last time before the aero packages, and that was when Alfa Romeo came in with the Alfa that you could buy the plastic bits and they were in the boot and you could fit them on yourself, and that was a whole hoo-ha on its own. But as soon as we went to wings and splitters, the cars treated their tyres better. And what was really good, and probably what helped touring cars a lot through its time, was you had different manufacturers, you had different tyres, you had Dunlop, you had Yokohama, and you had Michelin, all with a strength or a weakness at a different point during a race. So, one car on one tyre would be strong at the beginning, and then it would come back to you. And then this one would be strong at the end. So, there was a lot of good racing because of that. But I think touring cars improved as soon as we got the wings and splitters. They were more, okay, they went away from what your granny would drive to go to the races in, but nonetheless, they looked a wee bit more like a race car, a wee bit more. Today, with the huge wheel arches and the massive wings and some of the things, they don't actually look like the car you can buy in the showroom. And I think that was part of the real attraction to what we did in those days. Was it was a global championship, because when we did the World Cup, the first one was held at Monza, then we ran at Donington, and then we ran at Paul Ricard. Now, there was something like, I think it was 50 or 60 cars arrived from all over the world. the super touring regulations was the same in Australia, South Africa. It didn't matter. Scandinavia, all round about. And what it did was it gave us the opportunity to sell the last year's car to another country that maybe wasn't quite as ready for the latest thing. So there was always a ready market, which was why we found an awful lot of the Vauxhalls and the Opels up in Scandinavia, because for some reason, the Scandinavians loved those. And but the place I went to buy the engine and gearbox, the guy took me out the back and he said, "Do you need any doors?" And I said, no, we're actually making our own doors. He said, "No, come on, I'll show you." And he must have had 350 doors of Vectras stacked up. And my Jamie, who went with me, he said, "There's your Donington 97 door up there." I said, "How do you know that?" He said, "Look, it's got the 3 garlands on the door, because every time we want to race, we put a garland on the door." He said, "That's your 97 car." He knows more about the thing than I do. So the guy had me clamber up on a ladder to sign this door, only after we'd negotiated a better price on the gearbox. So I mean, it was amazing that all this Vauxhall stuff seemed to migrate to Scandinavia somewhere for whatever reason.
Fantastic. I'm glad I asked that. Okay, Guy, quick fire.
Okay, so it's got a few questions for you, John. Just first thing that comes into mind. So Top Gear or Grand Tour?
Grand Tour, because what do you call us on it? Abby.
Abby. We've had Abby on. She's been on.
Have you? All right. No, but I raced against Abby at the Silverstone Classic when she was driving that big Holden.
Oh yeah.
And I had never met her before. I didn't really know who she was. And she's a peddler. She knows how to pedal. And she's a super lady as well.
She's a character. We need
from Hull, where I'm from. She's from Hull, where I'm from. So I've known Abby and her dad Paul for years. But yeah, she's a real talent. So
she is.
Yeah. Knock Hill or Bathurst? I know what you mean.
This could be really difficult because Knock Hill were one of my main sponsors, personal sponsors. I could put whatever I wanted on my crash helmet and my overall.
Knock Hill on.
And they ran Knock Hill Racing Circuit. I ran with that from day one in touring cars till the very end. And they were lovely, lovely people. Derek Butcher and Gillian, and then ultimately Gordon Shedden. You know, I loved the place, but I won in all the years that I raced there. I won one race. Jeff Allen used to kick my butt up there every time we went there. I would scare the living daylights out of him for an hour and a half back to my house, fill him full of wine, scare him for an hour and a half back to Knock Hill again, and he'd kick my ass in qualifying. I'd do the same again home at night and back in the morning, and he'd kick me up and down during the race as well. I could never get on there. So the answer to the question is Bathurst, without doubt.
Beach holiday or adventure holiday?
Probably adventure holiday. Adventure. Anything that's daft, I'm up for. Years ago, 95, I was asked if I'd drive the Porsche Super Cup car as a support round to the Grand Prix, and it took a lot of convincing. My boss at Vauxhall, I'm racing for the championship in a front-wheel drive, front-engined Cavalier. I've been offered a drive in a rear-engined, rear-wheel drive Super Cup, and I had to fight to do it. And they let me do it. And I think I ended up 6th or something like that. But the Monday after the event, I did a bit of wing walking on the biplanes.
Oh wow!
As an article for Autosport, and the girl whose name was Helen Tempest, right? I always remember that name. She was Helen Tempest. She certainly was. Lovely wee girl, and she showed me a bit about how to stand on the roof, the wing of this biplane, and we were down at to Weston Airfield, just down from the Grand Prix, and I'd forgotten to tell my wife that I was going to be doing a bit of wing walking. So this article came out, and there's me on the wing of this Tiger Moth doing laps of the Grand Prix track, and I said to the guy, "Oh, this is fantastic. Can we do loop-de-loops and stuff like that?" And he said, No. All the camera gear's only just sitting in the passenger seat. So I had forgotten to tell my wife that I'd done that. She gets the Autosport out the mail on the Thursday morning when I've got back, and I get a phone call in the office. What's all this about wing walking? And who's Helen Tempest anyway? So I really got in the for that. So anything mad, I'm up for it.
Okay, dogs or cats?
Dogs. Dogs. In fact, I'm surprised you can't hear them.
I think we just say
the theme.
One guest in however many episodes say cats, haven't we, Paul?
Yeah, and then actually they relented when they saw our expressions and pretended it was all about dogs, didn't they? Start pushing the cat out of the shop.
Look, see it up. Maybe you can't see him up there. See the cat?
Yeah, I've got a cat, yeah.
The cat.
He's been watching the podcast. Oh, another one.
Little dog.
Right, oversteer, understeer.
Definitely oversteer. As I said to you, I'm not a big fan of understeer. I hate it. Kills me.
Okay, Vauxhall Cavalier or Ford Falcon?
Ford Falcon. Ford Falcon. I've come second at Bathurst driving a Ford Falcon. I have to. And the other thing about Bathurst, I'll tell you quickly, was having come second there, we were 1.5 seconds behind Mark Scaife in the factory Holden, behind him at the end of the race. And we started 21st on the grid in car 21. So we finished 1.5 seconds behind Scaife. And while I was standing in the pits with about 20 minutes to go, the guy from Gatorade said to me, if you get a bottle of Gatorade up on the podium, I'll give you $5,000. I said, oh, that'll be easy. He said, no, it won't be that easy. He said, they'll frisk you. Trust me, they will frisk you. Make sure you don't do any product placement. So I stuffed it down the front of my trousers, this big bottle of Gatorade. I've shoved it down the front of my trousers. We've gone out on the podium. And the first thing I've done is I pulled out this Gatorade and going, yeah, I'm drinking it away. You've never seen people move so fast to take a bottle of drink off anybody.
Really? Wow.
I got my $5,000.
That's excellent.
Okay, right. V6 or V8?
V8. V8.
So it's an interesting one. So I've got a pass along question from your mate Steve Soper.
If only we'd have known then.
I know, if only we'd have known then.
Steve, ask John a question.
Yeah, no, exactly. What did your teammates think of you?
Yeah, well, I know James Thompson, he didn't like me very much because, we ran a bit close sometimes, and fortuitously he had not for him, but for me, I suppose, fortuitously 95, Knock Hill, he had a huge accident that put him out for the rest of the season. I had the measure of him by that stage anyway, so it didn't really bother me. But yeah, he was tough going. Jeff Allen, great guy. Derek Borick, I loved being Derek's teammate because I knew Derek and I had done some stuff sadly after his brother was killed at Oulton Park. I was quite into the safety side of things, and I was a big enough noise in the touring car side at the time, long before Derek was in it. Yeah. And we went round a lot of the UK circuits looking at safety to see how we could improve things. So I kind of knew Derek from then, and I always admired him as a Formula One driver, mainly because he ran back from the Parabolica to grab the spare seat in the Lotus and get back in it after he rolled it upside down. So I loved being teammates with Derek.
What did they think of you? Did they think you were a hard driver of a bargain when you were out there? Or did they quite like being your teammate, do you reckon?
Probably not. But there again, I didn't get involved in motorsport to be everybody's friend. When I realized, you asked me way back at the beginning, did I think I could be a race driver? Did I think I could make a career of it? It was only when things started happening in probably 91, 92, that I thought, this could work. And they're paying me to do it. How good is that? I then realized that I can make a pretty good living out of it. And I do regret 96, Audi, John Wickham at Audi phoned me at the end of 95. And I had just, for the first time ever, managed to do a 2-year deal with Vauxhall, 95 and 96. New Vectra coming. It'll go with number 1 on it because I'd won the championship. Got to be good. It was terrible. John Wickham phoned me late on in the year of 95 and said, we'd like you to come and drive with Frank Bieler in the Audi. We're coming across to do the UK with the Audi Quattros. And I said to him, John, I'd love to do it, but I've agreed a deal with Vauxhall. I haven't signed the contract for this year, but I verbally agreed to do a 2-year deal with them. And when I shake somebody's hand, I stick by it. And he said, but we can get the lawyers on it. We'll get you out of it. And I said, yeah, I'm quite sure you can. But genuinely, I'm a man of my word. I made a promise to the managing director of Vauxhall I would do 2 years. So I'm going to do it. So I'm really sorry. Another regret, because when Frank Bieler left touring cars, he goes and wins Le Mans 5 times with Pirro. And they're slightly younger than me, but not much. Again, maybe a missed opportunity, but hey, it happens. So do they think I'm a good guy or a bad guy? Maybe Muller thinks I'm a bad guy because I maybe didn't get on as well with him. And then I went off to be FIA World Touring Car Driving Standards Advisor. And who did I want to get even with? Tarquini, Muller, Rob Huff. Who's next? Come in. So that gave me the opportunity there to box a few years.
Brilliant.
But I would say that Jeff and I got on probably best of all. Jeff was my mentality, my sense of humour. So is Derek. Derek's got a great sense of humour. And he forced me, when he took over the team, being a teammate with somebody's one thing, but being a teammate with the team owner, the man with the money in it, was always a bit of a, I wonder if I'm getting the real deal here. And Derek said to me the first year, he said, right, we're going to a ski trip for the winter, a ski training trip. I said, no, we're not. I don't do that. I'm a honed athlete. I don't do that. So he said, no, you are. He says, you're going where I've gone with Formula One forever. I said, I'm not. He said, well, you're not driving then. Suit yourself. I said, what is it? He says, we're going to St. Moritz. And he says, that's where all the teams go. We're going to cross-country ski for a week. And then we're going to do the gym, the this, the that, the tennis, the da. And he forced me. He told me that I wasn't getting a drive if I didn't go. And I am really not a keep fit kind of a person. But I did my cross-country ski. And the last day, we had to do the marathon from whatever it was, the far side of St. Moritz, up to St. Moritz, and then the same distance the other side. A marathon on skis. For a bloke that is not fit, and for a bloke that's never been on a set of skis, far less wee things this size, I did it. I managed to do it. And Warwick, I got to the end of it and he said, I am absolutely amazed that you did not give up. I said, well, I wasn't having you beat me, so that's the end of that. So I got on really well with Derek, and he's really funny bloke.
Brilliant. So, John, do you have a question for our next guest?
Well, I suppose you yeah, what was it like when you put grease over the camera on the Volvo? Yeah. Well, I told you about my babysitter incident in the car. Ask your next driver, what is the most interesting or scary thing that's ever happened to them in a car, whether it be a road car or a race car?
Brilliant. Great question.
And no sex.
I think we did that with Jason Plato, didn't we? Not
Well,
the question.
I'm only saying that because I was caught by the police one night in the back of a car when I was much younger with a policeman's wife, which really didn't go down too well.
There's the headline for the YouTube version, guy.
Many years ago.
That's a scoop I wasn't expecting to get. So what, if the 11-year-old me had been told that I'd be sat in a room talking to a Le Mans winner, multiple race winner, and the BTCC champion, John Cleland, no less, after drawing pictures of his car when I was 11, I'd have been made up. And I hope if you've been listening to that at home, but you've been watching that on YouTube, you've enjoyed. I just enjoyed. The best part of that for me was listening to these two bang on about left foot, right foot braking, and just listening to racing drivers and they really get into the nitty gritty like that, he's fabulous for me. But whatever you took from that, guys, you've been listening at home or watching, I hope you really enjoyed that, because I thoroughly did.